And without more ado, thank you very much, Jake Seniuk.
Thank you. Of the cruelty of man. Creatures shall be seen upon the earth who will always be fighting one with another, with very great losses and frequent deaths on either side. These shall set no bounds to their malice. By their fierce limbs a great number of the trees in the immense forests of the world shall be laid level with the ground. And when they have crammed themselves with food, it shall gratify their desire to deal out death, affliction, labors, terrors, and banishment to every living thing. And by reason of their boundless pride, they shall wish to rise towards heaven, but the excessive weight of their limbs shall hold them down. There shall be nothing remaining on the earth, or under the earth, or in the waters, that shall not be pursued and molested and destroyed. And that which is in one country taken away to another, and their own bodies shall be made the tomb and the means of transit of all the living bodies which they have slain. O earth, what delays thee to open and hurl them headlong into the deep fissures of the huge abyss and caverns, and no longer to display in the right of heaven so savage and ruthless a monster? Leonardo da Vinci. Well, we're 19 days from the end of the world, I think, by the Mayan calendar, so I thought this was a very appropriate piece to read, which comes from this piece over here by Alyssa Greitz, who's with us here as well. And I was kind of taken by this piece and by her work in general, and she, having to select a prize winner, which is something that I'm often not predisposed to doing. My attitude towards art is always, it's not a competition, it's a communication. But in a show of this kind, you have to pick something out, and Alyssa's work is always captivating me. I chose her for the grand prize winner, this piece, but mostly for the body of the work that she submitted. And this piece is a little bit different than the others. It's this is an appropriated book that she found, where you can see it's been excised here, and it's called This War We Wage, and there are little snippets of Hitler and Stalin along the edges, all along here, and it's something that she found. Maybe she can talk about it later on to tell you more about it. But I thought it was sort of an appropriate moment for this work, given our times. Her other work, actually, we have an antidote to that. We can protect ourselves from what's coming with armor here, which I thought was a nice mate to that work as well. And her third work, I've picked 3 of her 5 pieces, and is this one behind here called Nadi, and I think that it's also in this vein, in a sense. It reminds me of a Mobius strip, the endless surface twisting on itself, and sort of the snake twisting on itself, the infinity symbol. So there's an eternal kind of evocation from this work, and it's also a knot. We're tying ourselves in a knot. So I'm always looking for meaning in work. I'm drawn to work that has content and strong meaning, and interesting use of materials as well. She's this hammered aluminum, and it's a recycled material as well. So, beginning with that. I didn't know quite what to talk about. This is not a thematic show. It's not a curated show. It's a selected show. So there's no overarching theme to address and pontificate about, other than the size of the work. That's what brings the show together, are this miniature size. There are a couple of themes, though, that come to my mind that can be extracted from this work. And one is of transformation. And art is very much about the process of transformation of materials and ideas, and brings me to another one of the select works, and that's from Mayor Titian's work. There's one right around there, and this round one here as well, and these are made from repurposed wood, recycled wood taken from shipyards, and brought together to give them a new life. And there's a sense of transformation in there. And you see the history of, some of the history of that wood. That's left in the paint that's left here, in the shapes of materials. So that's really, I think, another strong element, direction in 20th century art is transformation through collage and recycled materials. And speaking of collage, we have one of our other winners, Harold Nelson. And it turned out these are our artists that I've shown at the Port Angeles Fine Arts Center, and that wasn't conscious, but their work I'm familiar with. Selecting this work was pretty much blind. The things were laid out ahead of me, and then I just went, one of these and two of them, and this is one of Harold's pieces, and there's a number of them in the show, and his work has always been very evocative and strong. This one I thought was interesting. It refers to Cézanne. It says this is referring to his series of Mount Saint Victoire, which Cézanne painted over and over again. There was a view outside of his window, and this is sort of a historical reference to that, and it's also an evocation of what Cézanne did for modern art, where he started to fragment space and break it up into smaller components, which led to cubism afterwards. And Harold's given it another twist by using all these little snippets of collage materials he's cut from publications and put together. So there's this sense of fabrication in the work. And collage is really, I think, one of the key elements in the development of modern art, where you're taking things out of the world, as Mayer did too with her wood. You're taking images or materials out of the normal daily world and putting them into a new context where they start to have a new meaning, but they're still recognizable the parts are still recognizable from their sources. So that spoke to me as well. So it was just why I singled out his work. Let's look at the third person selected. Yeah, right. We can pick one of those. Marie Amerson, who works in portraiture, and I think one of the labels I gave this work when I first saw it was that she paints in a Nordic light, and because his work reminds me of Edvard Munch, German Expressionism, and there's this, and this work especially has a really dark undertone to it. It's an actor, I believe, is the subject of this, but there's this sense of inner emotion, perhaps the shadow, the Jungian shadow inside of us, and I think it's really strong painting, very gestural. The brush strokes are evident and left there, so you can see the work of the hand, and the color is used in an emotional, evocative way, which is characteristic of Expressionism, and not in a very realistic way. The color is emotional. Okay, thanks. So, looking at the work collectively, the thing that all this work has in common is it's small, right? That was the theme of the show. That there were, I think it was 15 inches by 15 inches by 15 inches was the only parameter that was specified to the artists. The artist could select, submit up to 5 pieces, and some did. Some only had 1 piece. There were 147 pieces entered by 43 artists. I ended up selecting 87 works by 40 artists, and that was a function of the size of the gallery. It's always hard to eliminate work, of course, and I tried to reach a wide variety of aesthetics, which a group like this will always have a smorgasbord of approaches, and pick the strongest work, really, and also works that kind of relate to each other visually, because whenever I put a show together, you always think about how it looks as a whole and all those components, and things start to talk to each other. So almost everybody got in. A few people didn't, but that wasn't, it's somewhat not a conscious choice, because I wasn't aware of who was who. And I had a question earlier, right before by one of the artists before we began. Well, why did you pick those 3 pieces and not the other 2 pieces? And her work was they were quite different from each other. She works in a number of different ways, and that can always be a detriment in a show like this, where you look like 2 or 3 different people rather than one person. So it's always good to have some, even if you do variety of work, to have a consistent body of work. And I'm always looking at bodies of work, and having 5, the opportunity to have 5 pieces, I think is really an advantage to a juror, because you can see if there is a sensibility or a voice at work here, because as artists we need to find an identity that's recognizable. You walk in a museum and you look across it, oh, it's a Cézanne, I know it, I can see it without reading the label if you have the background. So we're always looking for individuality and style that can be recognized. So I was walking around earlier before and trying to think about what does this miniature style entail? What is it? What's common in here? And there a few different ideas came to me. One is they're small pieces. They're complete works in themselves. So a couple of examples of that would be these cups by Corian Schreitz. Did I say that right? These 3 cups, which are complete in themselves because of the nature of the medium. Cups are cups. They're small, always in themselves, unless they're sculptures. And she's done some really wonderful drawing on them, and so use them as a canvas, basically, and they're a utilitarian object in a small, but they are given a personal flavor with these surface decorations. Another type of work that's miniature and is the illuminated page, and we have Marcia Hollingsworth, I think. Don't you want to bring one of those out? And this work, I think, plays to the tradition of books and illuminated manuscript. Yeah, hold it a little higher, Jay. Okay, and so it's miniature by historically. It's referring to those forms. So I thought that was a good use of the miniature format. And Beth Houtmacher. This was kind of interesting. It's a painting in itself, but it's a big subject. It's a miniature, but this could be 8 feet across as well, because you're looking at an expansive horizon and sort of an endless view in a sense. So it's kind of interesting to see this as a miniature. And then she also has this bird, this felt bird, which it comes from sort of folk art and decorative art. I think I liked it because of her name, which is Hutmacher, which means hat maker in German, and it's made out of felt. So it's a hat that's been reconstructed as a bird. Maybe she didn't think of it that way, but I'm always looking for symbolism. Okay, so there are other works like that are complete in themselves as miniatures. Opposed to that are works that that become vignettes of something larger. They imply vignettes. Jay's work is like that. You want to get one of yours, Jay's? Again, this is a work that could be work in different sizes, but by painting around the edges and extending it, and actually the two kind of really work together, butted together. I had them laid out that way when I was playing with them. And so there's this sort of infinite implication, this expansion onto the world beyond the boundaries of the painting. So I think that's an interesting use of that format, that small format. Kim Simonelli, who did these bronze sculptures. There's one on the wall not bronze, so they're steel, but that also spills beyond its frame, beyond its boundaries, and implying the world beyond. Here's another one as well. This one is perhaps stronger to the point I'm making. But and again, also, all these ideas overlap. Repurposed materials assembled in a new way. So this relates to the collage tradition in 3 dimensions. And then Charlie Peterson, which one was he?
It was a she.
She. Oh, yeah. This has that same sense of extension in a different material. It's nice to be able to include lots of different materials in the show. So the fabric material was one of the few submissions in that. And again, we see this extension in the composition to flight and the world of nature. Okay, and then another use of the miniature traditionally is as a means of preparation for larger works or vignettes from larger works. Sandra Offutt's work over there, those 3, the cow and the donkey and the couple, they're complete in themselves, but they also could be studies for larger compositions or excerpts from larger compositions, and sort of a more narrow focus on a part of the whole. Jeanette's work, Jeanette Best, her figure and child here. Again, it's reduced in size from the natural. It's something that could be a study for a larger piece, a public art piece perhaps, maquette, but it's complete in itself in that size that it exists in. Another thing I wanted to talk about that's always of interest to the viewer are the use of materials, and that's something that activates a lot of work. Gail Larson's work, these 2 I thought were quite interesting. They're paintings, pretty much, but they have collage elements which are photographic that are glued onto these painted backgrounds. So there's an interesting kind of shifting in space that happens between the photographic realist interpretation and or rendition, I should say, and the interpretation that's painted behind there. So there's a tension that kind of develops between these elements and that element, primarily from the difference in the materials. Les Schnick, is that right? There he is. Obviously, inventive use of materials using bamboo and mesh and creating work that has 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional characteristics to it. Using those materials to create sort of an illusionistic space as well. And let's see, Sheldon McKee, is this Sheldon? Sorry, Sheldon McKee, which was that piece? Oh, that one, yeah, that was kind of an oddball piece in a way, and it's caught my eye. It's made out of beads, which are, is a decorative element, but he's taken it to, is it he? She. She. Is she here? She. Yeah, she. It's sort of a talismanic fetish figure. It could relate to primitive art, like African art, but it has a kind of a ready kilowatt face and modernist quality to it. So I think that was an interesting use of materials that are conventionally used in other ways. Well, mostly I wanted to get your responses to it. So that's a little bit of my thinking in going through this, and I could talk about each piece. I suppose if we walked around, it's a little difficult in the situation we're in. But why don't we throw it open to your comments and questions?
What you had talked about before about having a kind of recognizable look to your work, I've been struggling with that, I guess, because some of my collages are very different than some of them, and I had someone tell me that I should try and sort of pick a style and a recognizable style, so somebody could walk in and say, oh, that's, you know, and,
Yeah.
and I'm having a really hard time doing that because I really enjoy working with the different styles. And would it be just that you don't submit the different styles to the same show, or that they should be similar in color? Would that be enough to tie them, or what?
Well, there's a lot of, I mean, each work has a lot of different characteristics. There's some consistency to your work. I mean, just in the collage approach, you know, I mean, you're not doing collages and photographs, you know, nature photographs, things that are completely divergent. But, you know, style is it's something that emerges from you, I think, from doing. And finding, you think of it as a voice, you know, finding a voice. You do scales, you know, if you're a singer, and lots of preparatory exercises. And as you make more and more work, your interest will start to focus. You know, the difficulty, as I said earlier, for a juror or a curator in looking at disparate work is that it's confusing in a sense, especially when you're thrown into a pool with a lot of other artists. You know, we have how many people? We had 43 artists in the show, which is not a huge pool. I mean, often you'll be in the pool with hundreds of artists, and jurors will think that you're three different people if you have three different styles, and that that works. You know, a juror or a curator is trying to create some continuity in the show. As I said, I'm always thinking about the whole show, how pieces relate to each other, how artists relate to each other, and there's this sense of dialogue. I mean, dialogue is a word you hear a lot, and people talk about art, and what does that mean? You know, they're not talking really, but there's sort of electricity that can happen, and the dialogue. You know, it has a vast vocabulary to it. It could be relations in subject. It could be relations in references to other art. It could be relations in color and form. All those things start to play against each other. And as a curator or as a juror, I'm always looking. I think of it as a path I'm walking. I'm looking for a path, a route through all this work, and there are waypoints along that path where one is like connect the dots. Almost one thing leads to another, and if you're thrown in as an individual in that, and you have three different ways, you know, you're going. It muddies the waters in a sense, and you know, I've struggled with this a lot myself in my own work when I was young, because I had different interests, you know, and you want to show everything that you can do, and but the way the world works, that is a detriment. And not that you shouldn't work in those different styles. I mean, you can try each of those, but keep them separate when you're showing. Yes.
I'm very interested in your thoughts on meaning in artwork. You had started out by mentioning that that was one of the things that you look for, and it's something that interests me. Do you have any comments about that?
Content and work. Yeah, content is a slippery subject, because content can take lots of different forms. I mean, it can be explicit meaning in you know, references, you know, in Harold's piece referring to Cézanne, you know, to the Mont Saint-Victoire, which may not be obvious to the casual viewer who may not know Cézanne, but someone who does, it's there. You can see it right away, and it gives another dimension to that work. It's not absolutely necessary to appreciate that work to know that, but it adds to it. So meaning, you know, it's a preference, and art is a visual. It's a visual world. So a lot of art appeals to the viewer sensually, sensorially, and sometimes that's all it's attempting to do. You know, Marcel Duchamp divided 20th century art primarily into two rivers, or two paths, and there's the retinal and the cerebral. and most works have elements of both. You know, they're not that distinct, but my preference is always to the cerebral. It's sort of my inclination, which is based on content and references to beyond the art world inherent in there. And but a lot of it, you know, and then there's work that's just very much formal. It's about painting and in just talking about painting as a medium, but there, you know, there's elements of both. You know, think of something like Barnett Newman, abstract expressionists, giant canvases with these single lines in them, sort of something on the order of this piece. And it's, you know, it's very sensual. It overwhelms you when you see it, just the scale of it. You know, it can be like 20 feet long, and it's larger than the human body. It's pure, it's rich color. It sucks you in, and it can be appreciated in that way. But then, if you look at it in the context of the history of art and the criticism that goes around it, it has a lot of content in that sense, where he's trying to reduce the world to its simplest forms and really take it out of the world. It's all about painting. And abstract painters, you know, got to that point in the 50s with abstract expressionism where they didn't want it to refer to anything outside the painting itself. It's a universe that's self-contained, you know, culminating in people like Helen Frankenthaler that just soaked the paint into the canvas so that there was no sense of dimension even to the world. But meaning is always contingent on the viewer as well, what the viewer brings to it. You know, the work of art is not complete until it's seen. So like, you know, if the tree falls in the forest, no one is there, does it make a sound? And art is like that. The viewer brings, there's a suggestion of meaning in a work, but the viewer has to bring his own history, his own capacities to extract meaning from that. But I'm naturally drawn to looking for meaning. It's you know, it's a philosophical bent. You know, why are we here? Why is the world ending in 2 weeks? It's not ending. You know, I just saw this thing by Terence McKenna about we're ready for an evolutionary change. I think it's happening. Yeah, I think it's happening with cyberly. You know, we're all being connected to you know, Facebook and all the other means we have that extend our bodies beyond. And I think we're ready for an evolutionary jump. And I think perhaps this Mayan idea that this change, it's not the end of the world, it's the end of the world as we know it. It's not the physical end. And a new you know, and we had a great election. You know, it was, there's hope, and for a more realized kind of life. And Port Townsend is a great place for that. I'm been here since yesterday. I've been in Port Angeles a long time and kind of sequestered in my little ivory tower there, and I don't get over here so much. And I loved it being here. I enjoyed. There's a lot of great people here and a lot of energy for transformation, I think.
I was interested in the photographs that you've selected. It seems to me with a lot of the technology that's come about, they've gotten to be more aesthetic, I guess, or they're just to me, some amazing photographs in this show.
Well, actually, a lot of the photographs were from the Hunters, who are a couple in life and in art, and I think again, like Houtmacher, their names are appropriate. Hunters, you know, going out and hunting for images. And there's sort of two ways. Well, I'll describe two ways of making photographs. Taking and making actually is a way to think about that. And my own background is in photography as an artist, and I've always been a maker more than a taker. And by that I mean photographers traditionally go out into the world and find interesting things to capture. There's this hunting aspect of it. You know, the primitive notion that we were told about I don't know if it's true or not, but like in anthropology, it was, like primitivists don't like to have their picture taken because they feel you're stealing their soul. There's a lot of truth to that, really, because if when you make an image, you take something, and then you take that image and you put it into a new context, and you can give it a different meaning. You know, a mugshot can be something in a high school yearbook. It can be something on a wanted poster as well, and the context it's put in affects the viewer's ideas about what that is. And the other way to work is sort of diametrically opposed, is making photographs, constructing things to photograph, or manipulating them heavily in the darkroom, and now in Photoshop. It's become the horizons have expanded tremendously what you can do to a photograph. These two photographs, I think, are in the first mode. But they also they relate to painting in a way, to abstract painting as a model, finding paintings out in the world itself, and you can see that they're influencing each other as well. They're a couple who work and live together, and there's a lot of similarity in their approach to the outside world.
It seems to me like more of art than it's ever been. I mean, it's like there's one in there that looks, I mean, it just almost had to be a painting, but it's not. It's a photograph, and it just seems like they've really crossed.
Well, that's not so new. You know, that's been going on from the beginning of photography, really. That photography has been influenced by painting. I mean, you have hundreds of years of tradition of visual, two-dimensional image making, and photography has referenced that from the beginning. And technology, really, the only thing technology adds to that is the degree of control, the manipulation that you can exert on that. And you know, in photography, there's a lot of attitude about purism and adulteration, sort of, and many photographers have a purist attitude. You take it, you see it in the camera, you don't mess with it. You print it as it is, and it's sort of the reporter's inclination. I remember when I submitted photographs to the Peninsula Daily News often, I tweaked something in Photoshop, you know, on there just to improve the photograph, and they would reject it. So we can't have, you know, and they were like promo shots of people in a group or something. So this isn't really allowed because we're reporters. They don't have the same reserve in editing letters to the editor, though, and fixing the spelling and the vocabulary of wackos set right into those. But there is a long-held purist attitude, but that's broken down a lot now with Photoshop, and everybody recognizes that photos lie, or photos are abstractions, really, and they have been from the beginning. As much as they may not seem that way because they have a one-to-one correlation with reality in the beginning. You know, you have to have the thing there to photograph it. But there's a lot of language to photography. The type of film you use, the type of back in the film days, the type of lenses you use. You can photograph the same thing in many different ways, and it's ultimately a language, and which is an abstraction. It's a symbol-making form. Now people, I think, you know, since Photoshop has come in, everybody's aware of how much photos can be manipulated, and it's so much easier. I mean, you can tear a photo apart in layers and do wonderful things to it. I love it. Okay.
I want to know how you feel about this quote. This quote is new to me from Martha Graham, and she's talking about how to find your passion and how to be motivated about doing art. And she says it's your business to keep the channel open clearly and to keep your work yourself, you know, expressing yourself, nobody else. And she says, it is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. You do not even have to believe in yourself or your work. And I wanted to know what you thought about that.
That's curious. I don't know. I think, you know, being open is a form of belief in yourself. I mean, you don't want to be. I mean, you know, you don't want to believe. You want to be handicapped and hamstrung by what others think of you. You want to. I mean, to get something really true, you have to get down. You have to be intimate. You have to find intimacy in life, and you find intimacy. Sorry, this gives me a fact. I've found intimacy in the last few years, and it's been wonderful. And you know, being an artist is finding intimacy with the world. I think with what you're seeing, what you're moved by, and despite what, and that kind of entails honesty. I think that's at the bottom of it is honesty to yourself, honesty to the materials, to the subject that you're working with, and not being enslaved by convention, by propriety, by what others may think about it. And often, you know, work that's most interesting is reviled in its early stages and then becomes canonic later on, you know. And I think it's because the artist was open and honest himself. Duchamp had an interesting metaphor. He saw the artist as an antenna to the world beyond, and you receive signals, and so you become a medium of transmission of ideas and a greater reality. You know, reality is all around us all the time. It's always now. It's always here, wherever you are, and our consciousness encompasses that, and you need to be. You know, I think the whole point of life is to listen and be as open as possible to see what's right there in front of your eyes.
Being a psychotherapist and working with couples a lot, I think about intimacy a great deal. And one of the definitions of intimacy I've been using a lot is coming to know yourself in the presence of another person. And I suspect that with art, you know, when you make something, when you deal with material, I think you're coming to know yourself in the presence of your material and your art form. And so you come to know it, and you come to know yourself also. And I think I like the notion of it being intimate.
And this notion of dialogue plays into that. You know, as we've talked about here already. About content, you know, Karen's question was, and I characterize my approach to art as always being content-driven and idea-driven, and that can be a weakness as well. I tend to kind of conceptualize a project ahead of time and think it through from an art historical point of view, and you know, write a statement about it, and then start working at it. And I found almost in every case, once I start working with the materials, it changes completely, and the materials start talking back to you, and that's an exhilarating feeling when that happens, because you step beyond yourself, you step beyond the constrictions of the filters that you know, we're a bag of filters, and some people are really filtered, John Boehner, and. Sorry, but I think, you know, growing old is a question of trying to see those filters. Our culture filters us, and we see narrower and narrower, and everything looks the same. You know, the job makers got to have all the money they can have, right? I mean, it's crazy, but people actually believe that they've been filtered by their, you know, their country club existence to think that. I'm editorializing here. But hey, it's only 2 weeks till the end of the world. So I think that's a form of belief, the real belief of truth, and so that statement is puzzling to me in a sense.
Well, I didn't read the end of it. It said, keep the channel open. I mean,
Yeah.
she's saying your purpose as an artist is to be the antenna, the channel,
Yeah.
and to be open to that, but to keep it yours, your vision, yours clearly and directly, and to you don't have to like it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just have to do it. Right. You have to be open to doing it. If it's coming to you, and she says to be aware of the urges that motivate you. Keep the
Yeah.
channel open.
Yeah. To be fearless, in a sense. I mean, we're governed by fear a lot. Our actions are directed by our fears of what might happen, what others may think of us.
When you say an artist connecting to the world beyond us, that goes to way beyond just what we think of as artists. Einstein, for example, saw something no one else saw, the theory of relativity. Segovia, for example, a musician, many musicians get this feeling. I've often wondered where this music comes from. If I suddenly create a piece of music I've never heard before, where does that come from? It's the same type of connection, I think, that goes beyond just what we see here.
Yeah.
Just art through on life.
Yeah. It's cleansing the filters, you know. Aldous Huxley, the doors of perception. You know, if the how's it go? If the filters are taken away or cleared, you see the world. I mean, and that's as it really is, and that's our goal. I think that's our purpose in life. That's, you know, enlightenment is to sort of, you can't lose your ego, but you can set it aside in a sense. You want to. And maybe that's what Martha is talking about too, about the belief, like belief in yourself wrapped up in ego, a sort of self-image. And you find that a lot in the art world. There's a lot of ego involved, and people are, you know, it seems to be like an inverse square relationship. The more ego there is, usually the lousier the art is. And the best art I've seen, the artists I've met, that people tend to be pretty open and pretty humble, and because the ego has lost its importance. We're looking for truth, not self-aggrandizement. Are we speechless? Okay, well, if there's no more comments or questions, I think it's a beautiful Sunday afternoon in the real world out there.